talk. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Bond. James Bond. There were many skeptics and cynics, you know, before I did it. Is it going to work? Do we really need another Bond? But, you know, GoldenEye acquitted itself so well that it kind of shut them up a little bit.
There's been so many of them, and you have to somehow reinvent them. You have to keep them fresh, and at the same time, everyone tells you the moment they've heard you've got this job, they say, oh, you must do this, you've got to keep that, you've got to improve on this. You get hundreds of pieces of advice. Everyone has an opinion about it, everyone cares about them, so it's a tremendous challenge to try and do as well as the last ones, to be different and to reinvent it and yet keep it the same.
This week sees the opening of Tomorrow Never Dies, the 18th James Bond film. Since Pierce Brosnan took over the role, Bond has never been more popular. What's the secret of the original and greatest action hero?
What's always cracking about a Bond film is that, to repeat the old showbiz cliche, they start with an earthquake and build to a climax. Like, before the titles start, you get a stunt, the like of which most films could only dream of and would certainly put in the last 5 minutes of the movies. They almost throw that away to get you in the mood, and you watch it in the cinema and you think, I wish these seats had a safety belt, because where is James going to take us from here?
It's pure fantasy. Everything is bigger and larger than life.
He's going for the bombs.
As somebody told me, actually, he's a parson. And he said, when I come in at night, sometimes I'm absolutely whacked. And he doesn't go to his church and pray. He sits down and watches a Bond film, and he said, all my troubles disappear.
Sometime around the early 70s, I was telephoned and asked if I wanted to direct one, and I said no. I can't imagine why. I said no, I must have been mad.
It's very strange to work out why an English spy at the latter end of this century should still be a star to people all over the world, should still be a mythic character.
Bond has been box office dynamite since the early 60s, and the world is still enthralled by his exploits 35 years on.
Everybody's got this fantasy figure. In the late 60s, it was the man in a very murky and dark and deceitful world. One man could cut his way through it, maintain his dignity, look fantastic in a tuxedo, and still get the girl.
Bond is an amoral creature acting on behalf of a moral enterprise.
The world around him changes, and he adapts and reacts to that world that's changing, but he himself is a fairly constant character.
The character is actually the ultimate male chauvinist pig. There's no question of that. It's the man as supreme being, with the woman dotted around him for pleasure, usually occasional, and in danger enough to show that he's a macho man and can get out of it. But it's done so nicely that I've never even heard the women's organisations hint a word against it, and nor should they.
Is anything the matter, Celery?
Just a slight stiffness coming on.
Deep down, James Bond is quite insecure because he seems to have to compensate for insecurities to do with his sexuality by being hypersexual, bedding practically every woman of an eligible age.
Bond here. Going to Scrambler, Channel 4.
James? Where are you?
Oh, Moneypenny. I'm just up here at Oxford, brushing up on a little Danish.
He has to drive a very, very fast car. Oddly enough, he has quite a small gun.
This man has killed so many people. This man has had so many women in life. You know, what is he looking for? What pleases him?
Traditionally, he's meant to have suffered some kind of trauma in the past, maybe the loss of his wife or the loss of a partner, and this trauma is meant to explain why Bond is very closed off emotionally and doesn't really open up his emotions. And he's very much got the stiff British upper lip.
Oh, sorry about that.
He's a pretty tortured character in many sense of the word, deep down, when you think about it.
Here you had a good guy who was licensed to kill anybody, no questions asked. So basically you were giving this incredible and very evil power to a man and trusting and hoping that he wasn't a psychopath, that he would stay on the straight and narrow and he would use that terrible power wisely. And that's what makes him still such a fascinating character. The dark side is almost built into his job.
I think Pierce Brosnan especially is good at bringing out the vulnerable side without making Bond weak, which is the key to playing the character.
I suspect he might have a gambling problem, because there's an awful lot of gambling in the books.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr...
Bond. James Bond.
Mr. Bond, I suppose you wouldn't care to, raise the limit?
I have no objection.
He probably might have a bit of a drink problem, because there's an awful lot of drinking as well.
Tomorrow we will have to find Kirilenko's hideout.
Oh, meantime, I'll take care of this filthy stuff.
Another of his weaknesses is probably his paranoia. There's a sense in which a secret agent has to be paranoid. It's probably a great strength. But his paranoia and the fact he doesn't trust anyone, and that usually comes to his aid in the end, means he probably has difficulty forming relationships.
I think James's only weakness, but it is a terrible weakness, is his addiction to crashing and awful puns. You know John Cleese's 3 rules of comedy: no puns, no puns, no puns. And James Bond just didn't listen to that.
Smashing, Q.
Shocking.
Bring tears to your eyes.
You have to keep that tongue-in-cheek and humorous situation where in the midst of absolute mayhem, a wry remark is made. I don't think you can change a winning formula. It would be silly.
007's name was taken from James Bond's Birds of the West Indies, the book that creator Ian Fleming was reading at the time.
He ended up at the beginning of the Second World War as assistant to the Director of Naval Intelligence, where he was on the sort of fringes of the espionage network, and he incorporated a lot of the material for his later books during the wartime period. After the war, he went and worked for the Sunday Times as their foreign manager. Eventually, in 1952, he sat down and he began to write his first book, Casino Royale. After that, he turned out a James Bond novel pretty well every year.
He never had any exaggerated idea at all that he was writing literature with a capital L. On the other hand, he took considerable care to be very literate. The books are very literate indeed. They're very well written.
Part of the appeal of the books is the fact that at the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, Britain was coming out of a post-war austerity. And Bond had all these accoutrements, the handmade cigarettes, the Aston Martin. And I think there was something very aspirational about people's attraction to Bond. They liked all these objects of wealth that he had around him.
I'm sure there was lots of elements of his life that were like James Bond. I mean, he did like fast cars, he did like beautiful women, he liked gambling, he liked fine wines, he liked smoking, all those sort of things. I think inevitably when you write from experience. And the things that you enjoy go into that experience, and then you write better for writing about what you know. So I think inevitably there was a bit of Uncle Ian in Bond.
He was clear that he wanted to get a film deal, so he went out to Hollywood and he talked to film directors there.
Albert Cubby Broccoli was the man who finally brought Bond to the big screen.
Cubby was looking around for something new to do, and he met Wolf Mankiewicz, and they were working on the script, and Cubby didn't seem too interested in the project, and he said, well, Cubby, what would you like to do? And he said, I'd love to do James Bond.
No one could have predicted that Dr. No would have been such a huge success, actually. I'm sure that they thought maybe they were lucky to get 2 or 3 out of it.
The films have obviously made him a more universal character, although it's a different character in the films to the books, in my opinion.
Drop it, Professor, and behind you.
It's funny, I thought you'd turn up sooner or later. Sit down.
The late Cubby Broccoli really knew what he was doing when he set this thing up, and he set it up in a very fantastic way. There was no other film like it on the landscape at that time.
I'd never met a producer before. Producers don't come onto the set and shake hands and welcome a small part actor. I mean, the producer is sort of, well, I suppose he's God in a way, but I mean, you never sort of meet them or anything, but Cubby was always there.
I think his personality, and the way he treated people, made them respond with a great deal of loyalty, because he was thoughtful and loyal to his friends.
He really was the most remarkable man. And, I mean, if it wasn't for Cubby, there wouldn't be Bond today. There's no doubt about that.
Cubby Broccoli also produced one other action-packed, wheel-screeching, tyre-burning adventure by Ian Fleming, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
This is gold, Mr. Bond. All my life I've been in love with its color, its brilliance, its divine heaviness. I welcome any enterprise that will increase my stock, which is considerable.
I think you've made your point, Goldfinger. Thank you for the demonstration.
Choose your next witticism carefully, Mr. Bond. It may be your last.
Fleming himself said that the way he constructed the villains wasn't particularly complex. They were all usually foreign. They were never British. They were often a mixture of different races, but usually not Caucasian. If they were Caucasian, they were from a distant part of Europe. They often were physically grotesque. They were ugly and often physically deformed in some way. One had a third nipple, for example. It was very easy to get the audience to not like them by creating them in that way.
The tape I most recently watched was Goldfinger, and you know, Gert Frobe and I we're not a crossover, so it was great to watch him, because that was one of the great ones.
Anyway, there's absolutely no truth in this malicious rumor that I started rhyming the mad cow disease story simply because Angus Black, the great British beef baron, lost £10,000 in a game of poker to me and refused to play up. Moreover, there's even less truth in the rumor that I took 100 million francs from the French to keep the stories running for another year.
Excuse me, Mr. Carver?
Yes.
This is a new banker, Mr.
Bond. James Bond. Another new banker. I seem to collect them.
I think the public has a sort of misgivings, and they have, they're uncomfortable with the idea that a lot of the media is being vertically integrated and concentrated in the hands of a few media barons. And they're not sure what this means. And so we have sort of fantasized about the possibility of what would happen if the media baron wanted to use the media for his own ends and manipulate the situation. And I think that sort of takes it in a different dimension. It sort of brings it into the present and takes on a villain that I don't think we've ever dealt with before.
Good morning, my golden retrievers. What kind of havoc shall the Carver Media Group create in the world today? news.
Floods in Pakistan, riots in Paris, and a plane crash in California.
Excellent. Mr. Jones, are we ready to release our new software?
Yes, sir. As requested, it's full of bugs, which means people will be forced to upgrade for years.
Outstanding. Mr. Wallace, call the president. Tell him if he doesn't sign the bill doubling the telephone rates, we'll release the video of him with the cheerleader in the Chicago motel room.
Inspired.
And after he signs the bill, release the tape anyway.
Consider him slimed.
You see someone who presents himself in public in as pleasant and as amicable a way as possible. And it's very nice to have a character who shows the audience anyway, a public side and a private side. And it's unusual in this kind of characters. The public side is enigmatic and charming, and the private side is evil.
Bond's arch-rival Blofeld has appeared in 5 films. In the first 2, we never saw who he was. In the third, he had a scar all down his face. It had healed by the next film, but Telly Savalas' Blofeld had neither hair nor earlobes. Miraculously, both grew back again when Charles Gray took over the role.
If instead of blogs, Joe Blogs, you were Bond, James Bond, pursued by burly Boris and his mighty military machine meathead mates, you'd require rather more than some piddly little runaround. 007 Awesome Autos have more tricks up their sleeves than Paul Daniels in an octopus suit. With a flick of the wrist, he has Jodrell Bank. The silver screen becomes a smoke screen, and the road turns into an oily slick. No need, of course, to use it on Bob Monkhouse's driveway. If Tommy Terrorist takes a pot shot at your rear window, fear not. There's more chance of the Pope getting smashed. And there's a brand new feature being launched in spring. Yes, it's Bond in the pond, 007 in H2O. This sub-aqua saloon would cost you an arm and a leg, and you'd probably have to deal with a loan shark. Of course, down there, there's no need for traffic information from the eye in the sky, more like the ear off the end of the pier. Roger Moore, of course, used to star in The Saint as Salmon Templar. What's always grabbed me about Bond, though, is his versatility. His ability to effortlessly drive whatever goddamn vehicle comes his way. Yes, with Bond at the wheel, no one's going to catch this bug. Ha, they won't see him for moon dust. And on those picturesque alpine roads, it helps if you can reverse quicker than a battalion of yellow-bellied Italian tanks. Let's see that again. These days, of course, there's always some rotten little tea leaf out to half-inch your jam jar. Should Gunter and his goons try and break in, they'll get a blast of AC/DC. Followed by keep a knocking, but you can't come in. And if you're anything like me, guys, and you're fed up with a little woman yapping away in the back, saying you're going too quickly, too slowly, or whatever, Bond has the answer. Yes, the car for the backseat driver is finally here. That's Bond, Jane Bond, licensed to kill, and licensed to drive flash cars bloody quickly, whilst Bolshe Boris blasts bazookas at him. Home, James.
After the success of Bond's car in For Your Eyes Only, Citroën sold a special edition 2CV with tasteful, rather large 007 logos on the doors and Go Faster bullet holes all over the body.
Well, a lot of what is to do with the James Bond theme comes, strangely enough, out of the theatre. I wrote a stage musical called Belle, the ballad of Dr. Crippen, about Dr. Crippen, the murderer. One of the main backers was Cubby Broccoli, and Cubby Broccoli liked the score very much, and he asked me to come and see him and Harry Saltzman at their office. He offered me Dr. No. I didn't know much about James Bond at the time, but they said there was 12 weeks in Jamaica, so I said, I'll do it. I did most of the West Indian music, like Underneath the Mango Tree.
Underneath the mango tree, my honey and me.
Who is that?
Then I wrote all the other stuff when I came back to England. But I wasn't completely happy with what I had as a theme song. I felt that I hadn't yet got the character of James Bond. And I suddenly remembered this melody from A House for Mr. Biswas. And I dug it out, and this is what the melody is. I was born with this unlucky sneeze, and what is worse, I came into the world the wrong way round. Pundits all agree that I'm the reason, and so on. So this was the song, right? And I thought, this is perfect for the James Bond theme. And it's been fascinating over the last 35 years hearing all the different versions, and there have been so many versions of my melody. And right up to today, where you have this wonderful version by Moby.
There's 35 years of heritage with this particular franchise, with the Bond stuff. And for me, John Barry's music was 50% about what made the film Bond. Otherwise you've got an action movie. I approached it more from a fan's point of view. Like when Pierce Brosnan turns up and he clicks a gun and kind of gives you the look and, like presses the button or does the gadget stuff, you want to feel that it's a Bond moment. I think the advantage that I had was that I was very aware of Bond music, and I just made the album Shaken and Stirred, all the old Bond songs, so I'd been working with sort of Bond flavoured music for about 18 months.
Shaken and Stirred is David Arnold's hit album, featuring new interpretations of Bond classics by artists as diverse as Pulp, Chrissie Hynde and David McAlmont.
Most of the time it was me phoning him up and saying, I'm making this record, this is what the record's about, I'd really like to do this track, and they said yes. There's a couple where with David McAlmont, he wanted to do a Shirley Bassey one, and Moonraker I'd already done with Shara Nelson, so that left Diamonds Are Forever and Goldfinger, and I think even for David, like, Goldfinger was a sacred cow that we couldn't stroke, so we went for Diamonds.
Diamonds are forever. Hold one up and then press it. Touch it, stroke it, and undress it. I can see every part, nothing hides in the heart to hurt me.
Despite the musical tradition of the films, the only Bond theme to top the charts was Duran Duran's A View to a Kill, which reached #1 in America.
As part of his job as personal assistant to the Director of Naval Intelligence, Fleming used to be in touch with all the various departments that were sort of involved in the war. In the depths of another government department, there was this chap called Charles Fraser Smith, who was developing gadgets for agents behind enemy lines. And this is the character that he adopted as his quartermaster, or as Q.
We've installed some rather interesting modifications. You see this arm here? Now open the top, and inside are your defense mechanism controls. Smoke screen, oil slick, rear bulletproof screen, and left and right front wing machine guns. Now this one I'm particularly keen about. You see the gear lever here? Now if you take the top off, you'll find a little red button. Whatever you do, don't touch it.
No, why not?
Because you'll release this section of the roof and engage and fire the passenger ejector seat. Whoosh.
Ejector seat? You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
Well, a lot of people seem to think that I'm an inventor and will, you know, the mad professor and all that. Of course, Q isn't. He is a collector of all this various equipment.
I want that ready for Ahmed's tea party.
Everybody knows a Q, that kind of schoolboy swat. Now they're kind of computer hackers, but then he was the man who, with Heath Robinson, a couple of bits of string and a tin can, would make some device that could save the world.
Having problems keeping it up, Q?
Experimental model.
I think Q is quite pretty much the way he's always been. He's kind of an institution, and he brings that with him. He knows far more about the character than anyone else does, and he was great, but I don't think he's changed very much. I think M has developed a little bit. Judi Dench has a terrific sense of humor, and she's extremely strong in it, and her character is very strong, and yet she does it with a lightness and a sense of humor, so there's much more playfulness in it.
I have a missing British frigate.
I'm aware of that.
And instead of decisive action, all you want to do is investigate.
My goal is to prevent World War III, Admiral. And I don't think sending an armada into the recovery area is the best way to do it.
Where exactly did this mysterious GPS signal come from?
A commercial communications satellite.
Well, who owns it?
We're still investigating.
Investigating. With all due respect, Em, sometimes I don't think you have the balls for this job.
Perhaps. But the advantage is I don't have to think with them all the time.
I think when Dame Judi Dench became M, there was a definite turn in how the Bond women were going to be looked at and for the future. And with this one, even more so.
She's kind of more on the side of Bond now. They're less antagonistic, and they have more of a sparring relationship.
Your job is to find out whether Carver or someone in his organization sent that ship off course and why. Use your relationship with Mrs. Carver if necessary.
I doubt if she'll remember me.
Remind her. Then pump her for information. Sam Bond, who plays Moneypenny, is about to play my daughter in a play at the National. And I've directed her, and I've known her for a long time. And I was at Central with her father. It's rather incestuous, isn't it?
You're in that bizarre situation of you haven't got very much to do, and you have to try and make some kind of impact in a very brief time. And I think certainly the wit of that relationship helps a great deal. I'm afraid you're going to have to kiss off your lesson, James. We've got a situation here at the Ministry of Defence. We're sending the fleet to China.
Uh-huh. I'll be there in an hour.
Make that 30 minutes.
First hour means good.
You always were a cunning linguist, James.
Don't ask. Don't tell.
I mean, I think she does adore him, and I think that he's very fond of her, but I don't think... Unless he was going to offer her, you know, the house and the children and the dogs in the country, I don't think that she'd be silly enough to fall for the charms. There have been 5 James Bonds, 3 M's, 3 Miss Moneypennies, 5 Ernst Stavro Blofelds, but there has only ever been 1 Q.
The Bond women, although portrayed initially as sexual objects in terms of the way the films are publicized, within the actual stories are usually very modern characters in terms of being very professional women. They usually have a clear job. They usually do it very well indeed. And the job is very similar often to what Bond does.
Good afternoon.
Can I help you?
Yes, my name is Bond. James Bond. I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
Usually Bond, in this very competitive adversarial relationship at the beginning, bests the woman, demonstrates yet again that he's even better than she is. And in doing that, seduces her.
The idea that Bond could, Bond's weakness for beautiful women would actually be his downfall, arrived quite early on. Certainly the character of Pussy Galore was almost Bond's match in terms of physical prowess.
Who are you?
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
Some people have criticized Fleming because they believe the subtext there is basically Bond putting women back in their place, where they belong, which is in the bedroom and as sexual objects. And usually in the end, Bond rescues the woman, you know, kind of finally crystallizing their dependency on him.
I need refilling.
Mm-hmm. Of course you do.
I thought it'd be really nice to get past the kind of babes from the last 20 years and have a modern co-star, a heroine who would be terrific and strong and tough, and we ended up with Michelle Yeoh, and she was wonderful in it. She was exactly what I wanted.
Michelle Yeoh is going to cause quite a sensation, I think. The way she and Bond sort of team up, their whole relationship, her rejection of him as a lover, you know, and kind of trying to get rid of him most of the time, solve the case her own way.
If I didn't know better, I'd say you were following me around, Mr. Bond.
You'll have to admit, though, we seem to have developed a certain attachment to each other.
Hopefully, not for long.
Wei Lin is definitely a woman of the 90s. Strong, independent, willful, smart, and equal with Bond.
This time, there is a weakness with it, because they presented me with a scenario, a story outline, and I said, well, one of these women should really mean something to him. Someone whom he loved, someone whom really got too close.
Do you know I used to look in the papers every day for your obituary?
Well, I'm sorry I keep disappointing you.
What was it, James? Did I get too close? Did I get too close for comfort?
James has slept with 45 women on screen, but has only been married once, to the Contessa Teresa di Vincenzo, who was killed by Bond's arch-rival Blofeld as the happy couple drove away from their wedding.
Hey, Brosnan, you.
He's marvelous because he's very patient. And, you know, I am getting awfully old and absent-minded and I forget my lines and all that, but I mean, he couldn't be more helpful and nicer to work with.
We worked very well together on the set. Well, we were handcuffed like almost a quarter way throughout the whole movie. And if I had to be handcuffed to someone, thank God it was Pierce.
He's wonderful. And you know, when I was back in America before I came over to do the movie, and when I started telling people in Hollywood that I was going to do it, and everyone across the board says that Pierce is the nicest person in the world to work with, and I really found that to be true. And
oh, it's lovely. It's lovely. I think he's a great fella. He's very warm, he's very funny. He's very beautiful. Quizmaster Bob Holness once played James Bond in a South African radio production of Moonraker in the 1950s, and Batman Adam West was briefly considered for the role of Bond when Sean Connery retired. Holy Miss Moneypenny.
One of the things I thought they did wonderfully in GoldenEye was the tank chase. I thought that was, it combined the best of Bond. It was funny, it was kind of a character thing. It was tremendous action, and I thought that was unbeatable. They'd done it so well. You can't get a bigger thing than a tank. You can't do it any bigger. And I finally decided, well, I won't do it bigger. I'll do the opposite. So I'll put him in the most vulnerable thing, which is a motorcycle.
If there's action involved and big special effects and big stunts, they take time to set up. So whenever there are big sequences like that, it's very close liaison between myself and the second unit director.
First of all, we discuss what sequence would be good, and I give my input in as much as what would be safe, what's possible, what's practical, what I think's been done before.
Once you've got past the script, you see in a location, you come back and you storyboard it. And then it's a progressive build-up from there.
They had this great idea of going along a rooftop on a helicopter and jumping over a helicopter. And I thought, well, you know, that's sort of been done at times, but how can we make it differently?
When they get on the motorbike and they're off, it starts off as like a few bullet hits, and then the bullet hits increase, and the firepower that is used against them. The helicopter then joins in, so there's more firepower.
We got Michelle Yeoh and Pierce both riding the motorcycle, which was fantastic. You know, you see them roaring down the street with this helicopter behind them, chopping up the stalls, and it's wide shot. You can see Pierce is actually riding the motorcycle.
They were both very game and great to work with.
It's the way we ride on the bike. It's not one person riding, because we're handcuffed together. We have to work together. I'm working on the clutch and he's working on the acceleration. It took us a little while to get used to that, but it turned out to be a very interesting sequence.
No, we worked well together. She's a great lady to work off of, and she's got a good sense of timing. She's got a real good, balance.
We had the balcony collapsing, we had the jump over a helicopter, landing on a roof, crashing through the roof.
That was some stunt, that, I've got to say. The obvious stunt being the bike going over the top of the helicopter, but probably the stunt that people won't actually appreciate is the stunt of the helicopter getting into that street. I mean, it was absolutely amazing how he did it, and all credit to him.
Pop the clutch.
The only character that has been played by more actors than Bond is Felix Leiter. The CIA agent has had 7 incarnations and even managed to change race in one film.
My name's James, Douglas James. I'm 007, licensed to thrill, but never licensed to kill.
I've been a James Bond fan since about the age of 11 years of age. Big hobby of mine, collected toys and memorabilia for many years, and realised that my passion could grow into something a lot larger.
Well, what I do for a living is run the James Bond 007 International Fan Club and Archive, in which we produce publications, events, products, everything to do with James Bond, really.
I've been running the James Bond Collectors Club since 1985.
My whole occupation for the last some 2.5 years has been a double look-alike of Pierce Brosnan in the James Bond role. It's a full-time occupation. I do maybe 3 or 4 gigs a week in 3 or 4 countries a month. I'm forever wearing a tuxedo, the bow tie, and the obligatory watch, and of course the never to be forgotten Walther PPK. And it's the best job in the world.
People will pay, thousands of dollars or hundreds of pounds to acquire dolls and figures, road race sets. Tin plate toys from Japan, especially of the Aston Martin, very, very popular. A lot of people tend to be fanatical about all the variations and the different packaging the boxes. types of products that come from all over the world.
There are so many people that are interested in James Bond that they come from all varied backgrounds. I mean, our membership, it could be a bus driver, a doctor, an accountant.
We have people as far away as Argentina, Canada, America. Japan is a very big market for James Bond.
Well, everybody's usually interested in collecting all sorts of memorabilia, but I think that they join the fan club and then they continue to subscribe to our magazine because we write articles about how the films were made.
I wear the commando gear, I have the frogman gear, I have the flying suits.
Fans are obviously obsessed with the whole thing, and you do get some strange requests from time to time. I think the strangest one, we've had a few, that we had was somebody wrote in and they wanted to know the inside leg measurement of all of the James Bond actors. And I don't mean the 5 guys that have played Bond, I'm talking about everybody that ever appeared in the movies.
From time to time, it's very difficult to go out. Magazines, posters have the face of Brosnan on, and people have become confused, especially in non-English speaking countries. So they then think, it is you, it is him, who is it? And they're confused, and it's then very difficult, if they don't understand the English language, to explain you're not who they may think you are.
With Pierce Brosnan coming back in GoldenEye, we're starting to see a tremendous amount of memorabilia on sale, just like we did in the 60s.
I would never ever sign Pierce Brosnan. My name actually is James, so it's quite feasible for me just to sign James on there, and they're quite happy with that. But many people do now tend to know me in my real name as Douglas James.
I think Bond is universally loved by so many different people, and it cuts across all class and barriers, religious barriers, everything. Everybody loves Bond.
Bond merchandising has always been big money. There have been products ranging from special edition BMW Z3s to frozen chips and packets of peanuts. However, a request to market 007 condoms was turned down.
I think everybody who's ever been a little boy has got to admire James's gadgets. From the magnetic device for undoing a lady's zip without touching it, through to the briefcase full of stuff from Q.
An ordinary black leather case with 20 rounds of ammunition here and here.
It's all those little toys and trinkets and fabulous little doohickeys that it's like that great predictability in all Bond films. The first 5 minutes, he goes to see Q. Q gives him a load of stuff. You probably won't possibly ever need this, James. And everybody's going, great, we can't wait for the moment when the exploding talcum powder saves James Bond's life. So that's what it'll be. Not the girls, not the cars, the gadgets.
In this film, I'm supplying with the 2 main gadgets, which of course is the BMW and the Ericsson telephone.
Talk here, listen here.
So that's what I've been doing wrong all these years, huh?
Look, it also includes a fingerprint scanner and a 20,000-volt security system. And this I'm particularly proud of. The remote control for your car. Tap twice.
Well, the Ericsson telephone sort of does everything but talk. But the ridiculous thing is that in time to come, it most likely will do all these things. And people say, oh, how old-fashioned that film was.
It's surprisingly difficult to drive, but with practice...
You can view pictures down a telephone. You can control things down a telephone, like steer a car. So, in theory, all you need is a camera to see where the car's going, to view on a screen of some sort, and then on the other end of the line, some sort of control of the car. So that's all feasible.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see how she responds to my touch, AQ. Think we understand each other?
Grow up, 007.
We do get people asking us for gadgets from Bond films. Movies have a lot to answer for as far as we're concerned.
The CIA assigned a research and development team to try and recreate Bond's Aston Martin after watching Goldfinger. you broken something?
Only my tailor's heart.
The return of Bond has done a great deal for the sartorial qualities of our heroes, who have become rather scruffy of late.
Of course, the suit has gone gradually out of fashion, and in fact it hit its nadir, I suppose, round about Bruce Willis and Die Hard 1, where of course the hero becomes the blue-collar man wearing the torn T-shirt.
The image of Bond is the man, and what it needs to suggest is a man who can move through several different societies and several different countries and several different environments with ease.
James Bond, as imaged by the early films, was the international man.
Taxi. All right, then go ahead.
Help yourself.
By the very nature of a very simple pared-down style and the lighter weight cloths, when James Bond, or the image of James Bond, hit the screen, particularly in America, you had a situation where they took one look and said, ah, this is a modern man. That style was changed ever so slightly with Lazenby.
Allow me.
And it echoed what was happening in the post-Carnaby Street era. Diamonds Are Forever, where Sean Connery came back to re-establish the part, is quite a sparse wardrobe, but one of the suits actually has very, very elaborate lapels on it, which would never have been seen in the early ones. That was the look of the times. Roger didn't wear anything at all that was extreme. There were far more extreme clothes around being proposed. This was the look of clothes that were being sold all over the country at the time. Timothy Dalton was wearing a three-quarter length leather jacket. Perfectly all right for the period. That was the look of the time. And Brosnan is now echoing a certain degree of formality, which is, again, back in fashion.
Fashionable Chelsea in London is 007's home. Bond boffins have deduced that he lives at 30 Wellington Square in a comfortable flat just off the King's Road.
My favourite James Bond character is actually probably the one that's usually nominated as being everyone's favourite, which is Sean Connery.
He was the first, the best, the original. He will always be the one and only Sean Connery, the best Bond of all time.
Has to be Sean. I think everybody's favourite James Bond is Sean. I don't think anybody's really touched him, although they've been very good.
Sean, of course. I think Pierce runs a very close second.
Without a doubt, there is only one, Roger Moore, the man who could wear a sky blue short-sleeved safari suit, the best Bond of all time.
My favourite Bond, of course, is Sean Connery, and I think most people will say that. Although I think Roger Moore had some very good moments.
He only did the role once. He was cracking. He's in my favourite Bond film, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Jules Lazenby.
It's true!
I loved Roger Moore very much, but I have to say Connery was my Bond.
Pierce.
Interesting role model.
Oh, it was Sean Connery, I'm afraid, from the beginning.
I think because he's got a twinkle in his eye, as well as being far too good looking and dynamite with the ladies, it's Pierce Brosnan, because he's brought an extra layer of, not exactly tongue-in-cheek, but he almost stands back from the character as he's really enjoying it, so I do like Pierce Brosnan.
Darling, I'm killed.